All right, we begin with a Fox News alert. With a caravan of migrants approaching the U.S. border, President Trump sets his sights on birthright citizenship in just the latest move on immigration from the president days before the midterm elections. We'll examine the potential legal battle and the political options. Well, the president and first lady travel to Pittsburgh to honor those slain in the Tree of Life synagogue. The community is in mourning as funerals begin, and the president is met by protesters. We'll take you there live. And voters head to the polls in 1 week. The GOP is pulling out all the stops to stave off Democratic gains. Former GOP presidential nominee Mitt Romney hitting the trail to help other Republicans and himself. We'll take you along as he goes door to door. Hello and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Shannon Bream in Washington. We began with correspondent Trace Gallagher in our L.A. bureau with the latest reaction to the president's bold plans regarding birthright citizenship. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. The legality of birthright citizenship is now being hotly debated. Whether the president follows through on his promise of executive action is clearly unknown, but the controversy surrounding this issue is beginning to snowball, and that is bad news for Democrats who 7 days before the midterms wanted immigration out of the headlines. This whole thing started when President Trump made comments during an interview with Axios as part of a new HBO series debuting this weekend. Watch.
It was always told to me that you needed a constitutional amendment.
Right.
Guess
14th
what?
Amendment.
You don't.
You don't.
Number one, you don't need that. Number two,
I mean, that's in dispute.
You could definitely
that's very much in dispute.
Well, you can definitely do it with an act of Congress, but now they're saying I can do it just with an executive order.
The president went on to say we're the only country that allows birthright citizenship, which is incorrect. Some 30 countries have the same law, including Canada and Mexico. And House Speaker Paul Ryan quickly dismissed the president's comments. Listen to him.
Well, you obviously cannot do that. You cannot end birthright citizenship with an executive order. We didn't like it when Obama tried changing immigration laws via executive action. And obviously, as conservatives, we believe in the Constitution.
Other Republicans were more supportive. Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Chuck Grassley says there is a debate among legal scholars as to whether birthright citizenship extends to the children of illegal immigrants. And GOP Senator Lindsey Graham said, quote, finally, a president willing to take on this absurd policy of birthright citizenship, though Graham also intimated that Congress might be the best vehicle to change the law. Meantime, immigration rights activists and Democrats blasted the president, and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi called it an effort to divert attention from health care. President Trump says he has spoken to his lawyers about the legality of using executive action to end birthright citizenship, but so far, the president's legal team has not issued any comments. Shannon.
Trace Gallagher, thank you very much. A top military official telling reporters today he expects more U.S. troops will be deploying to our southern border as a second caravan has made its way through Guatemala now into Mexico. National correspondent William Lajeunesse, working around the clock, is live from southern Mexico for us tonight. Hi, William.
Well, Shannon, we are about 270 miles north of the Mexican-Guatemala border, just outside this abandoned rail station where their caravan is being held, if you will. They're sleeping pretty much now, but they just finished a very big rally. The entire caravan was there. There was no mention of changes in U.S. policy, either the military going there or changes in asylum rules, and also the potential that there'll be tent cities there for the duration of their immigration hearing. The individuals that we spoke to basically said, listen, we believe that the law and public opinion is on our side, which is why they continue.
When I go to the border, I want to ask him for asylum policy, I want to ask him for the United States, Mr. President Trump, give me the opportunity to stay there, because I want to give a better life for me. I want to work.
Now, the rough count we have from police right now is the caravan is probably under about 5,000. Many have left on their own. Some took the train. 220 have elected to go home. 19 today. We talked to several of those, and about 1,700 are asking for asylum here. Now, some of the officials from this caravan are going to Mexico City. We told you yesterday they are still waiting for those buses. In fact, they'll be here again tomorrow. They want to take buses, everybody to Mexico City, where they're going to talk to officials there about their rights and transportation to Tijuana. Now, the other caravans you talked about, let's get this straight, right? So one crossed on Sunday. They overwhelmed police. There's a 162-mile border between Guatemala and Mexico. Some simply overwhelmed police. They're on their way to Tapachula. Then, on the Guatemala side, in Ticunaman, we believe there's over 1,000 there. And then they're waiting, we are told, for a third caravan to come out of El Salvador to meet them there, where they will also again try to cross the Mexico border, basically taking the same route as we have here. I'll say this, Shannon, that if I knew what I know now about what's happening in America, I think that information should be communicated to these people, and I would probably have second thoughts about still trying to come to the U.S. because President Trump has frankly changed the rules of the game. The pictures that they have seen the last 4 years and the overwhelming number of Central American families and unaccompanied minors, that's different, right? That's changing. At least that's what the president is vowing to do, and that should change the equation in their head, whether they should continue because they could get abandoned basically at the U.S. border, where they can't go north and they have no money to return south. Back to you.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things from all your reporting for these many days, William, has been how many people you talk to who do not know exactly what they're going to face when they get to the U.S., and that for many of them it is not a promising situation. That's been very eye-opening for us on this side of the border. William Lajeunesse, thank you very much. All right, in the absence of congressional action on immigration, both Presidents Trump and Obama have taken on the issue with executive orders. Is it the right way to handle it? Let's bring in tonight's Power Panel. We have former acting ICE director, now Fox News contributor, Thomas Homan, the former Homeland Security spokesperson under the Obama administration, Marsha Catron, and Fox News contributor, former GOP Congressman Jason Chaffetz, also author of the new book, bestseller Deep State. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
All right, Marsha, I want to start with you. First of all, this idea of the additional troops that have been sent to the border. We are told that there are going to be an additional 5,200 active troops joining the 2,000 or so, plus National Guardsmen who are there. They're going to be armed, but not going to be confronting any folks who arrive at the border. They're about logistics. They're about support. What do you make of it?
Yeah, well, nobody wants to hear this, but there's no good solution to this, and taking a bunch of troops to the border is not going to do very much. We've done that before. It just doesn't work. We did it under the Obama administration. Nothing is going to stop these people from coming unless you address the underlying issues, the push factors of why they're coming here in the first place, and they're literally running from hunger and death. So, you know, states like where I am now in New Mexico and Texas have sent the National Guard before, but under a posse comitatus, they don't actually have the authority to do any kind of domestic enforcement. So they're really just there in a supportive role.
Yeah, and Thomas, I mean, you're the one who has real life experience with what's actually happening at our borders. What don't these troops mean to the equation?
Look, I think the troops are going to support the Border Patrol, right? The Border Patrol has a lot of assets tied up in logistics, moving food, moving medical supplies, moving personnel from one sector to another. This is where the armed forces can take those jobs, and that's going to release the men and women from the Border Patrol to stand that front line and defend this nation. I think it's a good idea that the military's down there. I think they're going to be very useful to the Border Patrol.
Well, and Jason, there are many people in the midst of this conversation, and we'll get to birthright citizenship, but talking about the many loopholes, the many magnets that are attracting people to this country, whether they're going to be able to stay or not. And they say only Congress can solve this. It has been going on for decades. There have been numerous attempts when you were in Congress. Even within this last year here, this last calendar year, nothing gets done.
Well, let's understand, it is illegal to come across the border of the United States of America if you don't have the proper documentation. We don't need another law to tell us that. And there is a good solution in that the Democrats should encourage this human trafficking. Let's call it what it is. It's human trafficking, and it's highly dangerous. You should not traverse yourself from Central America up to the United States of America. And the Democrats would do these people a lot of good if they'd say, you can't just come here if you want a job or you want to join your family. That doesn't meet the standard of credible fear. That's not how you get in with asylum. That's not the way it works.
Well, and of course, the president today, whether it was something that the White House was planning to roll out or something that he decided to share during this interview, has now renewed this debate over whether or not birthright citizenship is the direct context and understanding of the 14th Amendment. That's certainly how it's been interpreted for more than 100 years in this country. But it's renewing this debate. And tonight there is an interesting piece in the Washington Post. The headline, Trump's proposal to end birthright citizenship is unconstitutional. It's by George Conway, a conservative, and Neil Katyal, who leans to the left. They write together saying such a move would be unconstitutional and would certainly be challenged. And the challengers would undoubtedly win. Marcia, how about that? Because a lot of folks think, listen, the Supreme Court has not ruled directly on this question of whether people who are in this country illegally and have a child are still, the child should get automatic citizenship. There's been a very close decision back in 1898, but it sounds like the president actually wants this to go to the Supreme Court for a final decision on these facts.
Right. And look, treating our Constitution should not be treated like an Etch-a-Sketch. You can't just erase something and then, through executive order and then go back. Because the next president after this will be able to go back and change it. And that just sets a really dangerous precedent. That creates a lot of chaos. That means, if President Trump happens to reverse citizen birthright now, then the next president can just reverse it back. And that's ping-ponging our Constitution. That doesn't make any sense. And then it could lead to what if the next president is highly liberal and wants to repeal the Second Amendment? I just think it creates a chaos and a dangerous precedent.
All right. Interesting tweet by Buck Sexton, frequent guest on this show. He says, quote, because the Constitution, he's saying that as a quote. He says, it's a remarkable argument from many of the same people who think gun rights only belong to a state militia. Free speech doesn't mean you can hurt anyone's feelings, and executive power means whatever Obama wanted it to mean. Thomas, where do you think this debate goes now? The
bottom line is, right, if President Trump can do it, he should do it. When I was in Border Patrol Academy back in 1984, they were teaching me how to enforce the law against those that Jason Chaffetz says violate the laws and enter this country illegally, which is a crime. At the same time, they're telling us about this birthright citizenship. I'm thinking, this is crazy. Look, this entices people to come to this country. It encourages people to come to this country. I've been doing this job for a long time, and people that enter this country legally, they hide out long enough. They have several U.S. citizen kids. Then the Democrats will say, well, ICE, why'd you arrest this guy for 8 years, has 2 U.S. citizen kids? Well, look, he chose to have these U.S. citizen kids, knowing he was here illegally, knowing he was ordered removed by an immigration judge. This just, look, it entices people, and it's just not about enforcing law. People are going to die, come to this country, because as Jason Chaffetz said, the Democrats talk about abolishing ICE. They talk about sanctuary cities. They talk about, all these issues that entice people to come to this country. We got to stand by the rule of law, and that's what the president's doing, and I salute him for doing it.
Well, this coming so close to the midterms, of course, a lot of folks today say it's purely political. Here is what Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, and we're going to talk about some things going on in Chicago later on in the show. Here's his tweet. Please, I know election season catnip when I see it. The president doesn't have this authority, but he does have an interest in dividing the country and riling up his base. This is midterm election nonsense. Jason?
Well, Rahm Emanuel should spend more time trying to secure the people of Chicago with the gun deaths and violence that he has in his own city. As it relates to the caravans and this surge at the border, that was not the creation of Donald Trump. That was enticement of a lot of other things and reasons. And I think until we know really what is generating this surge to come up here, it's a combination, I think, of probably some enticements. But what is going on there? It is not necessarily credible fear. I recognize it's dangerous. But the president has a duty and obligation to protect the United States of America, and he's doing everything he's supposed to in order to do so, and I applaud him for it.
Well, we'll see, because almost everybody agrees the minute this does become a reality, if the president tries it, it's going to court. That's one thing we probably all agree on. Yeah. Marcia, Thomas, and Jason, yes. We may not agree on the outcome, but thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right, as the president and first lady solemnly paid their respects to those slain in Saturday in Pittsburgh, deep divisions remain. Correspondent Garrett Tenney filed this report from Pittsburgh after the first couple's visit to the Tree of Life Synagogue.
The president and his family came to pay homage to each of the 11 people slain in the worst anti-Semitic attack in American history. Nearby, though, there were protesters shouting the first family was not welcome in Pittsburgh. The Trumps joined Tree of Life Rabbi Jeffrey Myers, one of the few to publicly welcome them so soon after the violence, in laying stones in white roses from the White House at each of the Stars of David for the 11 victims. His second stop was the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, where he spent nearly an hour and a half visiting with the 4 officers injured during the attack, their families, and the medical team that's treated them and 2 other victims.
He expressed his thanks for their service and his sorrow over their injuries, and really wanted to hear some of their stories about the event and what's been going on since then.
Many of the protesters' message to the president, it's your fault.
We don't feel that his presence here today, when we are burying our dead, is even remotely appropriate.
The city's mayor did not join the president at the synagogue, saying he wanted to focus on helping his city recover. A group of progressive rabbis said the president's divisive rhetoric about minorities is partly to blame for the attack, but other Jewish leaders say the president's visit is welcome.
He doesn't serve to help our community or, as I see it, any community other than white nationalists. And white nationalism is really at the root of the problem here.
He is our president, and if he chooses to come here to be with us, I would hope, as Rabbi Myers, that he would be willing to engage in a conversation.
Funerals for the 11 worshipers began today. Thousands lined up to pay their respects at services for Jerry Rabinowitz, Daniel Stein, and the Rosenthal brothers, Cecil and David. Notably absent from the president's visit today were any other elected officials. The state's 2 senators, as well as top congressional leaders from both parties, declined invitations to join the trip, citing scheduling conflicts. Shannon?
All right, Garrett Tenney live there in Pittsburgh. Thank you. It is crunch time for the midterms. One former presidential contender busy working the phones and knocking on doors. This time, Mitt Romney's hoping to join the U.S. Senate. We've got an exclusive interview with him tonight.
I'm the one guy that'll be in the United States Senate if I get there that's actually run for president and not planning on doing it again.
And Chris Steigerwald is here live to break down some of the key midterm races, big states, new polls, 1 week to go. Not something you see every day. One of the most well-known politicians in the country, maybe the world, doing door-to-door retail politics. That's how big the stakes are this election cycle. Peter Doocy's live in Salt Lake City, where he caught up with Mitt Romney for an exclusive interview. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Shannon. Tonight, we watched as Mitt Romney went door-to-door canvassing in suburban Salt Lake City. And the reactions from homeowners were about as surprised as you would expect if Mitt Romney turned up on your front porch. And since he doesn't need any introduction in Utah about his Senate campaign, he had a down-ballot candidate with him at each stop, trying to remind voters that there are a lot of close contests here, even though he has been running a mostly quiet campaign.
Well, I've started with a pretty good lead. Having run for president, I'm well known in the state. And the state is a pretty Republican state as well. Those things combined make this not a hotly contested race, at least in the mind of most people. So it's not getting the coverage it might. But, you know, for people who are in Utah, why, this is an important race.
When you do go door to door, what is the look on most people's faces when they see, hey, that's Mitt Romney outside?
I do get a, what are you doing here? How did you arrive here? And, you know, it's just random, of course, where we show up. And, of course, the reaction changes from door to door. Some Democrats are not as enthusiastic as some Republicans, but by and large, a very big welcome.
If you win, how do you see yourself fitting in with a body where just about everybody is either trying to go viral or run for president in 2020?
Yeah, I think I'm the one guy that'll be in the United States Senate if I get there that's actually run for president and not planning on doing it again. And as a result of that, I think I have the freedom to really focus on issues that the people in our state care about, people in our country care about. That relates to our budget deficit, the amount of debt we have, as well as our immigration policies. So there's a lot I hope to be able to do.
Hillary Clinton, who also ran and lost, is now saying that she might want to run again. What do you think 2 years after the fact is going through her mind as somebody that's been there?
I can't imagine that she would ever really seriously anticipate another run for president. The last one didn't work out so well. And speaking from experience, if you had a campaign that didn't work out so well, take a lesson from that.
The other big story this week, the caravan approaching, might be a few weeks away, but the president is trying to take action by sending troops down to the southern border. Is that something that you support?
Well, we can't have people just walk into our country. The people from the caravan or anybody else that wants to come into our country has to come in legally. That means get in line, go to our ports of entry, make sure that they are able to be processed appropriately. Some will obviously return to their original homes. Others will be able to legally qualify for refuge in our country, but that's a process they're going to have to pursue, and they can't just run in willy-nilly.
Watching him canvass tonight, the night before Halloween, was almost like watching somebody dressed up as Mitt Romney going door-to-door trick-or-treating a day early. And he actually told me he has a Mitt Romney mask that might come out tomorrow. Shannon?
I love that idea. We're still not over the guy who answered the door in the tiger Snuggie or whatever that was. That was very sharp. Maybe he was early for Halloween, too. I know it's got to be surprising if Mitt Romney shows up at your door. Peter, thank you. All right, 1 week into the midterm election, some key races continue to tighten. We've got some new polls. Let's take a look at them with new Fox News politics editor of the Halftime Report, Chris Steigerwald, and author of the compelling read, Every Man a King.
That tiger cape was
that was everything.
Everything.
I loved it.
You know, what's more surprising, to see Mitt Romney on your porch, if you're Mitt Romney, a guy in a tiger cape comes to answer the door? I don't know.
I want that because I'm all about a Snuggie. I'm always freezing, so tell me where you get the tiger cape, and I will get one for myself. First of all, I tweeted out something earlier today. You said that whoever is acting the craziest is probably losing. Who do you think's acting a little crazy out there right now? Are you going to name names?
Well, look, all I can say is if you want to know, these campaigns have a lot more polling than we do, right? We have public polls, and the Fox News channel, by the way, is going to drop some hot poll action pretty soon. It's going to be great, and we're in the last round of public polling, but these campaigns have so much more. So when you see, because they spend all this money, they raise all this money and then burn it on very expensive pollsters, and you know, because you can see their BMWs driving around in Washington, D.C., but the candidates know when they're behind. So if you see somebody acting flaky, if you see somebody throwing out weird stuff, if you see somebody doing things differently, that means they think that they're losing.
And so they got to reach out. Okay, so let's talk about some really tight races, some not as close. But let's start in Arizona, where we have Kyrsten Sinema and Martha McSally, and a new NBC Marist Arizona poll puts them head-to-head. It has Sinema up by 6 points. Looking at the RCP, the average, it's within 46 to 45.8%. Sinema still has the advantage there. But a lot of folks thought that McSally would have gotten a little closer to her at this point, or actually be pulling ahead. What's going on in Arizona?
So let's think about Arizona this way. This is the benchmark. This is the question about whether or not what's this, if the Democrats have any shot, and it's, let's say they have a 1 in 5 chance or something like that, if they have any shot of realistically taking the Senate or even dialing the Republican majority down to 50 plus Mike Pence, it's Arizona. It's all about Arizona. We are going to be. This has been the hottest race since the beginning. It's been closely contested. It's the Democrats need a flip because they know Heidi Heitkamp is not thinking
North
about
Dakota.
Right. Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota is not thinking about what she's going to be doing next year. She knows it's not going to be in the United States Senate. So the Democrats know they're probably down 1 to start. Arizona is a must-win for them. And so far, it's cooked up pretty much the way they wanted.
Okay, so let's move on to Texas.
Okay.
There was polling that really scared the Cruz camp for several months. Now, the latest poll, the Q poll there, gives Cruz a 5-point advantage. I'm guessing they'd like more breathing room than that in a state that they say is going to stay red going into Election Day.
Greg Abbott is going to pull Ted Cruz across the finish line. Cruz has struggled, but
the governor there for re-election.
Yeah, the governor is going to help him enormously. A good way to think about this is Beto O'Rourke could win in Texas. Bob Hugin, the Republican, could win in New Jersey. We don't know exactly when we open up the can on Tuesday night, 1 week from tonight, about this time, we'll know what was in there, right? And it's either going to be, maybe it's the kind of year where a Republican can actually hold on and win in New Jersey. Maybe it's the kind of year a Democrat can win in Texas, or maybe it's some combination of the two. And that's why at this point, people should chill. We're close enough now. Chill, let's just see what happens and kind of enjoy it if you can.
Well, for all of us junkies, it's tough because these races are so interesting. I want to make sure we get to Florida before we run out of time because we've got 2 tight, big races there. And yes, that is my home state. It's awesome. Thank you. For all of its craziness, I love it. Okay, the Senate poll has got Democrat incumbent Bill Nelson up 45 to 43 over the governor, the GOP challenger there, Rick Scott. And the governor's race now within 1 point. These are both USA Today Suffolk polls. The advantage there is still for the Democrat.
And it has been narrow but consistent for Democrats throughout in Florida. Now, the Republicans tend to overperform the polls in Florida a little bit, and that was certainly been the case for Scott. But the question for Scott is, has he kept it close enough so that at the end, that little extra that little oomph, as George W. Bush would say, he can ooch over the line?
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of worry that the Panhandle, which tends to vote more conservative, is still much of it in ruins, and people are going to have a little bit more trouble voting there, and they've got other things on their minds. But you are on our minds tonight.
1 week,
Thank
sister.
You for coming in.
We're going to make it.
We'll be together. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you. All right, amid talk of a trade war with China, talk of a real war in the South China Sea. The dispute is heating up with an ominous warning from China's president. And later, Brazil's president-elect gives his first TV interview since the election. Hear from the man some are calling Tropical Trump. Tensions are flaring yet again in the South China Sea. And now the Chinese president is reportedly ordering his military command overseeing the hotly contested area to prepare for war. Here's correspondent Rich Edson on the trouble brewing in what Washington insists are international waters.
A relationship heading towards collision. The chief of U.S. naval operations says the United States and China will meet each other more on the high seas.
We do dozens of these operations around the world to indicate our position for sort of illegitimate claims, maritime claims, okay? Maritime claims that are inconsistent with international law.
The U.S. Navy continues navigating the disputed South China Sea. China has claimed territory there. This month, the U.S. revealed the Navy destroyer on patrol there had to maneuver to prevent a collision when a Chinese warship approached within 45 yards.
Some non-regional countries are doing things that are completely counter to our efforts. They have never hesitated in stirring up trouble and waves in the South China Sea.
Regional reports citing China's state television say Chinese President Xi Jinping is ordering forces in the region to make concrete preparations for fighting a war. And at the White House, preparations for further economic confrontation. The Trump administration is planning to announce by early December tariffs on all remaining Chinese imports into the United States. That's according to Bloomberg, which reports the U.S. would impose those tariffs if discussions fail between President Trump and President Xi. The report claims officials have made no final decisions as the two leaders are planning to meet next month at the G20 in Buenos Aires.
I think that we will make a great deal with China, and it has to be great because they've drained our country. We have really helped rebuild China. They've been taking out an average of $500 billion a year for many years. Not going to happen anymore.
The president told Fox he has tariffs on $267 billion in Chinese products ready to go if he fails to strike a deal. The U.S. has already hit $250 billion in Chinese imports with tariffs. And this afternoon, the Justice Department announced indictments against several Chinese intelligence officers and hackers who officials say repeatedly stole sensitive information from U.S.-based aerospace companies. Prosecutors say the hackers stole information on building a type of airplane engine and did so from 2010 to 2015 when they say a Chinese state-owned company was trying to develop a similar engine.
It's interesting because our president and their president have had such a warming of their relationship, and yet there's still very big issues between the two countries.
That's right. Substantial issues to work out. They're going to try to do it at the G20, but there's a lot there.
All right. Rich Edson, thank you very much. Brazil's newly elected president gives his first TV interview. That story tops where in the world? Jair Bolsonaro, sometimes referred to as the tropical Trump and self-described as a far-right leader, gives his first interview since the election and insists that minorities should not receive any special treatment.
We can't consider some minorities and think that they have superpowers or that they are different from others. I think that if we reached equality for everybody, everybody will be satisfied.
All right, over to Russia now, where several people are injured, one still missing after a floating dock sank and a falling crane left a massive hole in the deck of Russia's only aircraft carrier. That ship was undergoing a massive overhaul ahead of a planned relaunch into service in 2021. And to the waters off Norway's coast, they'll soon be host to two massive military exercises, a large-scale NATO-led military exercise and Russian missile tests. NATO's Secretary General expressing confidence today, saying he thinks both sides will act in a respectable way. And reports tonight, those 5 members of the Taliban who were freed in exchange for captured Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl have all joined the Taliban's political office in Qatar. Now, we're told they'll reportedly be involved in negotiating peace with the Afghan government. A State Department official said Tuesday that, quote, it's up to the Taliban to choose their representatives for these peace talks. Well, Hillary Clinton is back in the spotlight. Could a controversial comment upend her ambitions?
Do you want to run again?
No.
Wait.
No.
That was a pause.
Well, I'd like to be president.
Okay.
Former presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton, is back in the spotlight after making a controversial comment. Conservatives say anyone on the right would be in big trouble for saying it. Well, correspondent Kristen Fisher has details on a lot of things she's had to say.
Yes, it was quite a comment. And so a little bit of the backstory. What happened was the former Secretary of State was asked what she thought about the former Attorney General's comment, when they go low, we kick them. Now, his name, of course, is Eric Holder, but the journalist interviewing her called him the name of another prominent African-American politician.
What do you think of Cory Booker's? And you didn't comment on him, and you feel free.
Oh, I adore him.
What do you think about him saying kick them in the shins, essentially? Start to get to that kind of political.
Well, that was Eric Holder.
Yeah, Eric Holder,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know they all look alike.
No, they don't. Oh, well done.
So that's Hillary Clinton making a joke that all African Americans look alike. And during that same interview, she also admitted that she'd still like to be president, though she was very coy about whether or not she'd actually run again in 2020, Shannon.
I think that, yeah, the idea of running again is very unappealing. It was a very difficult campaign, but maybe being president is something that a lot of folks, if you could skip the running, they'd want to go to the president. But somebody else who's running right now is in a very tight race, Steve King in Iowa, and he is taking some heat from within his own party about some of his own controversial comments.
Yeah, he is, and this is coming from a top Republican, the chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee, Congressman Steve Stivers. He put out a statement today saying that, quote, Congressman Steve King's recent comments, actions, and retweets are completely inappropriate. We must stand up against white supremacy and hate in all forms, and I strongly condemn this behavior. Now, he's referring to a long list of highly controversial remarks criticizing diversity and immigration. He's retweeted a Nazi sympathizer. He's backed far-right politicians in foreign elections, including the white nationalist fringe candidate for Toronto's mayor. And last week, he told an Austrian publication, quote, what does this diversity bring that we don't already have? Mexican food, Chinese food, those things? Well, that's fine, but what does it bring that we don't have that is worth the price? Well, in response to all the criticism that he's been receiving from fellow Republicans, the congressman took a page out of the president's playbook by saying, quote, these attacks are orchestrated by nasty, desperate, and dishonest fake news. Their ultimate goal is to flip the House and impeach Donald Trump. But again, this most recent attack is not coming from the media. It's coming from a top Republican, Shannon.
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult, this is a tough race.
Right.
There's so much pressure on the Republicans as they try to hold the House.
I know.
They're
And
trying
this
to
is a tight race.
Yeah, and they're trying to distance themselves from anything they think could really jettison one of these seats they're hoping to hold on to. We'll see.
Yeah.
1 week from tonight.
I know. Can't believe it.
Kristen, thank you.
You bet.
All right, over to Missouri now, where the vulnerable incumbent senator, Democrat Claire McCaskill, is facing criticism from activists that she is not doing enough to engage the African-American community. There is palpable concern in Missouri, Politico writes, and other states that the party failed to engage early and often enough with black voters. Let's bring in Fox News contributor Richard Fowler and Fox News political analyst Gianno Caldwell. Welcome to you both.
Good to be here, Shannon. Thank you.
I want to talk about this specifically with regard to the party, because Politico, that whole article is very interesting about a number of Democrats, African Americans, have gone to the party and said, listen, I don't think you're taking seriously enough that minority voters may leave this party after President Obama leaves the White House in 2016 if you're not working out and to reach out and to engage with them. Here's something that DNC leader Tom Perez said back in December of last year.
African-American women in particular, and African-Americans generally, are indeed the backbone of the Democratic Party, and precisely because they are the backbone of the Democratic Party, we should never take them for granted. And in the past, we have.
Okay, so fast forward several months. This is what he said back in July in talking about this. He says African Americans, and particularly African Americans generally, are indeed the backbone of the party precisely because they are. We should never take them for granted. In the past, we have. And he said, I want to apologize for this. Richard, is the party doing any better in engaging?
I think they are doing better engaging. And in the particular race we're talking about, the Claire McCaskill race, I spent 2 weeks in Missouri, in St. Louis, during the Ferguson crisis. And I think there was a lack of engagement, and because you have a municipal government there that is just failing because of a lot of reasons that we don't have enough time to get into. But I think what you see as the party moves forward is you see the party really trying to engage African-American voters on a new level. One, by running African-American candidates and investing in African-American candidates. And two, by also listening to African-American voters in a new transformative way and having them actually be part of the process, right? We saw that in the Doug Jones race in Alabama, where African-American women took that race over the top for Doug Jones. And we see that taking place in Florida, where Gillum is leading DeSantis because African-American voters took him over the edge in the primary, and they will end up taking him over the edge in the general election.
Yeah, Gianno, how do you think the GOP is doing with this?
Well, the GOP definitely needs help. That's no question about it.
Help is an understatement.
I think when it started with Wait a second, Richard, because we got to be honest about what the Democratic Party has done, because what you said was completely false, and that's my opinion. When we talk about diversity, when we talk about the diversity and inclusion within the Democratic Party, look at Capitol Hill, look at their senior staffers. It doesn't really exist, Richard. And this
and the Republican Party has diversity.
Let Gianno answer. We'll come back to you, Richard.
This disrespect that the Democratic Party has for African Americans isn't a new phenomenon. You know this by way of the candidates we've seen locally. Let's talk about what's going on in Illinois right now with J.B. Pritzker. This is a candidate that's running for governor in Illinois who his Democratic staff that are African American are suing him for racial discrimination, Richard. This is something that's happened all across the board. And you and I know, and I thought we were going to have a real bipartisan conversation on this, we know that Democrats simply aren't doing enough to recruit. Now, on the other end, Republicans aren't doing enough either, but it looks a little different. Look at the 2016 race. We had African Americans and Hispanics running for president. Who do we have on the other side running for president on the Democratic side?
You had African Americans and Hispanic for president on the Republican side. I mean, I guess you can say that argument, but let's be real.
Carson,
you had
Marco Rubio. You may have forgotten about those.
You had President Donald Trump say yesterday he accused a Democratic candidate running for governor in Florida. He called him a thief with absolutely no evidence. He said
he's referring to the FBI investigation in which it has been revealed that there were Broadway tickets that were very expensive to Hamilton. I've not seen it. I've heard it's great. But those tickets were given to him rather than reported or paid for as normal. Yeah, I mean, that's just an accusation that's out there as part of this FBI investigation. I want to get to the next step of this because I want to talk to you guys about the celebrities who have gotten involved here. Candace Owens, okay, she tweeted this. There was a big gathering of young black conservatives here in D.C. this week, and she tweeted, "Real Donald Trump's approval today amongst black Americans is at a record high. That our Democrats took our fathers, destroyed our communities, and told us we can be nothing but their victims. Blexit is happening because it's time." That referring to blacks exiting from the Democratic Party. Richard, what do you make of Candace and the allegations she makes there?
Listen, I mean, there is a long history of both Democratic and Republican parties engaging in racism and bigotry from the dawn of time, right? We can go back to slavery and work our way through it. But here's what we know today. As we sit in this country today, you have a president of the United States that traffics in bigotry, that traffics in whether there's evidence, like we saw how it happened in Charlottesville, where he thought there was good people on many sides, and African Americans were left scratching their head because we only saw one side. And I think to say that there's this mass approval and there's tons and tons and tons of African Americans running to the Republican Party like it's going out of style. I want to see the evidence. I've missed it.
Okay, before we're out of time, I want to make sure you get a final word in here, Gianno. We're up against a hard break.
Well, I believe that there's certainly not Republicans, but African-American Democrats who are thinking twice about staying within the Democratic Party because they've seen the abuse and disrespect that it has had on the African-American community. There seems to be a lack of real concern and more of a thought that you're going to vote Democrat because you have no choice, which I find to be problematic. I talk about this on Instagram all day today. This is what the Democrats do. And it's unfortunate, but it'll continue so long as there's
stand up for vulnerable people.
We got to leave it there. We didn't even get to talk about Kanye, which we had fun discussing during the commercial, but we'll save that for another day. Richard and Gianno, thank you both very much.
Good to see you, Shannon.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, red state Democrats throwing Senator Elizabeth Warren under the bus. We will explain in our midterm roundup coming up next. Just a week to go, and vulnerable Democrats seek to tout their toughness on border security. That leads tonight's midterm roundup. Immigration was a focal point in the final Indiana Senate debate. Democrat Joe Donnelly sought to highlight his support for the border wall and against so-called sanctuary cities, while his Republican opponent, Mike Braun, accused him of being part of the problem.
I'm the only person on this stage who voted 3 times for a border wall. I voted against sanctuary cities. I've stood for secure borders with John McCain.
Are you happy with the way results have happened in D.C.? Do you think the people that have been there have fixed these problems?
Well, another vulnerable red state Democrat takes a swipe at Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. Montana incumbent Senator Jon Tester telling members of the Chippewa Cree tribe her DNA test results do not, quote, pass the test. Tester joins Missouri Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill, who pointed to Warren when our own Brett Baer asked her if she had any crazy colleagues in the Senate. Singer Barbra Streisand says she's putting her animosity about President Trump into song. The anti-Trump singer's latest release, Walls, due out Friday, features several tracks highly critical of the president and his immigration policies. Says she's also thinking about moving to Canada. if the Democrats don't take the House. All right, tonight's hero, 10-year-old Brody Barron, who is autistic, recently moved with his family from the UK to Guthrie, Oklahoma. His parents threw him a birthday party inviting his new classmates, but when the big day arrived, none of the 10 invited party guests showed up to the birthday venue. Brody, you can imagine, was heartbroken. His mom told the Main Event Entertainment staff no one was coming. And the staff told her Brody's day would be amazing. They'd give him a great party. So they did at no cost. The staff sang happy birthday, played laser tag and bowling, and he received a gift bag. Brody called it the best day ever. You're all a bunch of heroes. And by the way, on this first anniversary of our show today, a huge thank you to our amazing staff and crew here at Fox News at Night. Everybody works harder than you would imagine to get this show on the air. And we thank you, our viewers, who have stayed with us, joined us along the way, and become part of our family in the past year. You are our heroes as well. And the anniversary of this trip is also my husband's birthday. So I couldn't do any of this without him. Happy birthday, hun. I'll see you soon. Most watched, most trusted, most grateful you spent the evening with us. Good evening from Washington. Good night. Stick around for Tucker.